In the dazzling glow of an elite gala, Serafina, a stunning 32-year-old black woman, stands eclipsed by her husband, Julian, and his brazen mistress, Chloe. Humiliated and unseen, she uncovers Julian's treachery. He's stolen her family's prized land with a forged signature. Fury ignites her resolve, and she allies with tycoon Arthur Pendleton. In a heart-pounding climax, they storm the stage, confronting Julian and Chloe. Pendleton's voice thunders, exposing the fraud, declaring Serafina the rightful owner. The room erupts. Julian and Chloe reel, their empire crumbling. Will Serafina reclaim her legacy? What secrets lie in her fight for justice? This is a tale of awakening and triumph. Subscribe now, share where and when you're watching, and dive into her unyielding journey. What's your prediction for her story? The Apex's grand ballroom shimmered under a constellation of crystal chandeliers, their light fracturing into 1,000 prisms across gilded walls. The annual charity gala pulsed with the elite's laughter, clinking champagne flutes, and the soft hum of a string quartet. Serafina Vance, 32, stood alone near a marble pillar, her ebony skin glowing against a strapless, deep V red gown that clung to her curves, its sequins catching the light like embers. Her long, straight hair cascaded over her shoulders, framing a face that could command empires. Yet tonight, she was invisible. Her husband, Julian Sterling, held court across the room, his tailored tuxedo accentuating his smug charm. Beside him, Chloe, his young mistress, glittered in a silver dress, her laughter sharp as a blade. They were the evening's darlings, drawing every eye while Serafina faded into the shadows. She clutched her champagne flute, the stem cold against her fingers, her gaze fixed on the crowd that no longer saw her. Serafina, darling, that dress is bold. Chloe's voice sliced through the murmur, her lips curling as she approached, Julian trailing behind. Trying to steal the spotlight? It's a bit much, don't you think? Her words dripped with mockery, loud enough for nearby guests to turn and smirk. Serafina's jaw tightened, but she forced a smile, the kind that had carried her through years of these charades. It's a gala, Chloe. I dressed for the occasion. Her voice was steady, but inside her heart churned. The room seemed to tilt, the chandelier's light now a harsh glare exposing her vulnerability. Julian chuckled, his hand resting possessively on Chloe's waist. Let's not make a scene, love, he said, his eyes sliding past Serafina as if she were a stranger. We've got investors to charm. He steered Chloe away, leaving Serafina rooted to the spot, the air heavy with her humiliation. She turned, hoping to find solace in a familiar face. But the crowd parted for another figure, Marcus Reed, a former business partner of her father's. Once he'd called her Tsunami Vance, a nod to her fierce intellect and the legacy of Vance Industries. Now he barely paused as he passed, his gray eyes flicking over her gown. Serafina, he said, his tone clipped, what do you do these days to pass the time? The question landed like a slap. I've been working on a charity project for, she began, her voice bright with a flicker of pride. But Marcus cut her off, turning to Julian across the room. Sterling's got quite the empire now, hasn't he? He mused, already walking away. Serafina's words died in her throat, her fingers tightening around the champagne flute until her knuckles ached. The quartet's music swelled, a mournful violin threading through the chatter. Serafina's gaze drifted to a massive oil painting on the wall. A caged bird, its wings spread against iron bars, painted in hues of crimson and gold. It felt like a mirror to her soul. She had built this life with Julian, sacrificing her ambitions to prop up his. She'd traded the Vance name, her father's legacy, for a gilded cage that now suffocated her. A waiter passed offering canapes, and Serafina shook her head, her appetite gone. She caught a glimpse of herself in a mirrored wall, her red gown blazing, her posture regal, yet her eyes betrayed a storm of pain. How had she become this? A woman who once commanded boardrooms is now reduced to a decorative shadow. The memory of her father, Alistair Vance, flashed in her mind, his voice steady and proud, telling her, "You carry our name, Serafina. Never let it be taken." Chloe's laughter rang out again, sharp and deliberate, as she leaned into Julian, whispering something that made him grin. The crowd lapped it up, their adoration a knife twisting in Serafina's chest. She set her flute on a passing tray, her hands trembling. Enough. She couldn't stand here, shrinking under their gazes, letting their mockery carve away at her. She took a step toward the exit, her heels clicking against the polished floor, the sound of faint rebellion. The red gown trailed behind her, its sequins catching every light, a defiant flame in the sea of indifference. She passed a group of investors, their voices buzzing about Julian's latest deal, a prime plot of land, they said. A game changer. Her ears pricked. Land. Her family's land. The thought snagged, a thread of suspicion pulling tight. As she reached the ballroom's edge, the weight of the evening pressed harder. Chloe's taunt, Marcus's dismissal, Julian's betrayal disguised as charm. She paused, her hand brushing the cool marble of a doorway. The Vance name pulsed in her veins, a reminder of who she was beneath this cage. Her lips parted, a whisper escaping into the night. I am not invisible. The Gala's glow faded behind her, but something stirred within. A spark, buried but alive, ready to ignite. Serafina's heels echoed faintly as she slipped into a shadowed alcove off the ballroom, the Gala's clamor softening to a distant hum. Her red gown shimmered, its sequins catching the faint glow of a sconce, but her heart pounded louder than the string quartet's fading notes. The words she'd overheard, prime plot of land, a game changer, clung to her like damp silk. Her family's land. Vance land. The suspicion coiled tighter, a snake ready to strike. She leaned against the cool wall, her long, straight hair brushing her bare shoulders. The air here was quieter, scented with jasmine from a nearby vase, but it did little to soothe the storm within. Julian's smug grin flashed in her mind. Chloe's taunting laugh, a cruel echo. How long had they played her for a fool? She closed her eyes, willing the pain to subside, but instead a memory surfaced. Her father, Alistair Vance, standing on their family's coastal estate, his voice firm. This land is our legacy, Serafina. Guard it with your life. Her fingers brushed the gold ring on her right hand, a simple band etched with the Vance crest, a soaring hawk. She'd worn it since her father's passing, a talisman of who she was. But had she guarded anything? Her thoughts spiraled to the papers Julian had pressed upon her months ago, a thick stack labeled tax restructuring. Just sign, darling, he'd said, his smile too smooth. It's routine. She'd trusted him, her pen gliding over the pages without a second glance. The realization hit like a cold wave. Her signature, her betrayal. Footsteps approached, pulling her from the memory. Two men, investors by their tailored suits and bourbon-soaked voices, paused near the alcove, unaware of her presence. Sterling's a genius, one said, his voice low but clear. Snagging that Vance land for pennies? He's untouchable now. Forged signatures, though, the other replied, chuckling. Ballsy move. That plot's worth millions. Coastal, prime for development. Vance Industries never would have let it go. Serafina's breath caught, her nails digging into her palms. Forged signatures, her signature. The land her father had fought to protect, the cornerstone of Vance Industries, was stolen by the man she'd vowed to love. Rage surged, hot and sharp, but beneath it, a deeper wound bled. Her naivety. She'd handed Julian the keys to her legacy, wrapped in blind trust. The men moved on, their laughter fading, but Serafina remained frozen, the ring heavy on her finger. She twisted it, the hawk's wings catching the light. I'm not Mrs. Sterling, she whispered, her voice a blade cutting through years of submission. I'm Vance. The words were a vow, a reclamation. The woman who'd shrunk under Chloe's barbs and Marcus Reed's dismissal was gone. In her place stood Serafina Vance, the daughter of Alistair, forged in fire and ready to fight. She straightened, her gown rustling like a battle flag. The alcove's shadows no longer felt like a refuge, but a crucible, shaping her resolve. She needed proof, allies, a plan. Julian thought he'd buried her, but he'd only awakened a storm. Her mind raced, piecing together the fragments, his late-night meetings, the locked files in his study, the way he dismissed her questions about Vance Industries. It all pointed to a calculated theft. A soft clink broke her thoughts. A waiter, balancing a tray of champagne, paused nearby. "Another glass, ma'am?" he asked, his eyes kind but fleeting. "No," Serafina said, her voice steady, a new edge to it. "I'm done drinking tonight." She stepped past him, her heels striking the marble with purpose. The Gala's lights beckoned, but she saw it differently now. Not a cage, but a battlefield. Her gaze swept the room, landing on a figure across the crowd. Arthur Pendleton, the real estate tycoon, whose name carried weight her father had respected. If anyone could unravel Julian's lies, it was him. Her heart thudded, but fear no longer held her. She smoothed her gown, the red sequins blazing under the chandeliers, and took a step forward. The crowd parted slightly, as if sensing a shift in the air. Serafina's hair flowed behind her, a dark cascade of defiance. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was a force, a Vance, and Julian would learn what that meant. As she moved toward Pendleton, a memory of her father's words echoed. "Never let them take your fire, Serafina." She wouldn't. Not now. Not ever. The Gala's music swelled, but it was her pulse that set the rhythm, a steady, unyielding beat of vengeance and rebirth. Serafina glided through the Gala's throng, her red gown a blazing comet in the sea of muted tuxedos and pastel dresses. The chandelier's light danced across her sequins, her long, straight hair swaying like a dark river as she moved with purpose. The air buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, but her pulse drowned it out, a war drum urging her toward Arthur Pendleton. He stood near a velvet-draped table, his silver hair catching the glow, his presence a quiet authority amid the chatter. Serafina's heart raced, not with fear, but with the weight of what she was about to do. Julian's betrayal burned in her chest, her father's ring a searing reminder on her finger. This was her first strike. She caught Chloe's eye as she passed, the younger woman's smirk faltering under Serafina's icy stare. Chloe clutched Julian's arm, whispering something, but Serafina didn't pause. Let them watch. Let them wonder. She was no longer the shadow they mocked. Her heels clicked sharply, each step a declaration of war. Pendleton turned as she approached, his keen eyes narrowing, as if sensing the storm beneath her poised exterior. "Mr. Pendleton," Serafina said, her voice low but clear, cutting through the quartet's lilting melody. "Serafina Vance." She extended a hand, her chin lifted, the Vance name a banner unfurled. "No Sterling. Not tonight." Pendleton's brow arched, a spark of recognition in his gaze. He took her hand, his grip firm but warm. "Vance," he said, his voice gravelly with intrigue. "Alistair Vance's daughter? Your father was the most principled man I ever knew. He turned down $1 million deal once, said it didn't align with his values." A faint smile tugged at his lips, but his eyes searched hers, probing. "What brings you to me, Ms. Vance?" Her lips curved, a calculated blend of charm and steel. "A matter of principle," she replied, stepping closer to shield their words from eavesdroppers. The scent of his cologne, sandalwood and spice, mingled with the jasmine lingering in the air. "I've learned something troubling about my family's land. A prime coastal plot, stolen through forged signatures." "My signatures." Pendleton's expression hardened, his jaw tightening. "Go on," he said, his voice a low growl, the kind that could silence boardrooms. Serafina leaned in, her breath steady despite the fire in her veins. "Julian Sterling orchestrated it," she whispered, her words a blade slipped between ribs. "He's parading his triumph tonight, but that land belongs to Vance Industries. To me." Her eyes locked onto his, unyielding. "I need someone with your influence to expose him. Someone who values truth over profit." Pendleton's gaze flicked to the stage, where Julian was preparing to speak, Chloe at his side like a glittering trophy. A shadow of disgust crossed his face. "Alistair was a friend," he said softly. "He built Vance Industries on integrity. If what you say is true, Sterling's made a grave mistake." He paused, his eyes returning to hers, sharp as flint. "You're sure of this?" "Certain," Serafina said, her voice unwavering. "I signed papers I thought were routine. I was blind, but not anymore." Her fingers brushed the ring, grounding her. "I have proof. Documents, dates. I just need the right moment to strike. Pendleton nodded, a slow, deliberate motion. You've got my attention, Miss Vance, but this is a dangerous game. Sterling's got allies here. His gaze swept the room, then settled back on her. You're not your father, but I see his fire in you. If you're ready to fight, I'll stand with you. A shiver ran through her, not of doubt, but of clarity. She'd crossed a line. There was no going back. I'm ready, she said, her voice a vow. He'll learn what it means to cross a Vance. Across the room, Julian stepped onto the stage, his smile radiant, oblivious to the trap tightening around him. Chloe clung to his arm, her eyes darting nervously to Serafina. The crowd hushed, waiting for his speech, but Serafina felt only the weight of Pendleton's gaze, heavy with resolve. He gave her a nod, a silent pact sealed. She turned, her gown catching the light like a flame ready to consume. The ballroom's opulence faded to a blur, the quartet's notes a distant hum. All that mattered was the path ahead, a path she'd carved with precision and fury. Julian thought he'd won, but he'd underestimated her. The hawk on her ring gleamed, a promise of retribution. Tonight, the stage was set, and Serafina Vance was no longer a shadow. The ballroom's hum faded to a reverent hush as Julian Sterling ascended the stage, his polished smile gleaming under the spotlight. Chloe clung to his arm, her silver dress shimmering like a trophy polished for display. Serafina Vance stood at the room's edge, her red gown a blazing inferno, its sequins catching the chandelier's glow. Her long, straight hair framed her face, a dark crown of resolve. Beside her, Arthur Pendleton's silver hair glinted, his eyes locked on the stage with a predator's focus. Their pact, sealed moments ago, thrummed in the air, a storm ready to break. Julian raised a champagne flute, his voice smooth as velvet. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we celebrate not just charity, but ambition. Sterling Developments has secured a future that will reshape the city's skyline. The crowd erupted in applause, their adoration a sickening wave. Chloe beamed, her gaze sweeping the room, but it faltered when it met Serafina's. Unyielding, piercing. Serafina's heart pounded, not with fear but with purpose. Her fingers brushed the Vance ring, its hawk emblem a silent vow. She glanced at Pendleton, who gave a curt nod. Now, he murmured, his voice a low rumble. Together they moved, her heels striking the marble with a rhythm like war drums, his strides deliberate and commanding. The crowd parted, whispers rippling as Serafina's gown blazed a path to the stage. Julian's smile wavered as they climbed the steps, the spotlight shifting to frame them. Chloe's grip on his arm tightened, her eyes darting between Serafina's fiery presence and Pendleton's steely calm. "What is this?" Julian demanded, his voice sharp but unsteady. Pendleton stepped forward, his presence silencing the room. "A reckoning, Sterling," he said, his gravelly tone cutting through the tension. "You stand here boasting of ambition, but it's built on theft. The coastal land you claim as yours belongs to Vance Industries, to Dr. Serafina Vance." He gestured to Serafina, his eyes never leaving Julian's paling face. Gasps erupted, the crowd's murmurs swelling into a chaotic buzz. Serafina stood tall, her red gown a beacon under the lights, her voice clear and unyielding. "You forged my signature, Julian," she said, each word a dagger. "You stole my family's legacy, thinking I'd stay silent. You were wrong." Julian's jaw dropped, his charm crumbling. "This is absurd," he stammered, turning to the crowd. "She's lying. She signed those papers willingly." But his voice cracked, betraying his panic. Chloe's face drained of color, her hands trembling as she stepped back, her silver dress no longer a trophy but a shroud. Pendleton raised a hand, silencing Julian's protests. "I've seen the documents," he said, his voice booming. "Forged signatures, backdated contracts. You thought you could bury the Vance name, but you underestimated its heir." He turned to the crowd, his gaze sweeping over stunned investors. "Dr. Vance is the rightful owner, and I stand with her to see justice done." The room exploded. Phones flashed, voices clashed, and board members scrambled to confer. Chloe, desperate, lunged toward Serafina, her voice a frantic whisper. "I didn't know Serafina. He told me you agreed." Serafina's gaze flicked to her, cold and unyielding, a queen dismissing a pawn. "Save it, Chloe," she said, her tone ice. "You chose your side." Julian's hands shook as he gripped the podium, his empire unraveling. "You can't do this," he spat, his eyes wild, locked on Serafina. "You'll ruin everything." "You ruined yourself," she replied, her voice steady, a blade honed by betrayal. The spotlight burned brighter, her red gown a symbol of vengeance realized. The crowd's chaos swelled. Cameras clicked, investors shouted, and the quartet's music faltered into silence. Pendleton signaled to security, who emerged from the wings, their faces grim. "Mr. Sterling, you're done here," one said, gripping Julian's arm. He struggled, his voice rising to a desperate plea. "Serafina, you can't do this." But the guards pulled him back, his polished facade shattered as they escorted him through the stunned crowd, cameras flashing like lightning. Chloe stumbled after him, her silver dress catching on the stage's edge, her composure gone. Serafina watched, unmoved, her hair a dark cascade under the lights. The room's chaos was a symphony now, her triumph its crescendo. Pendleton placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice low. "You did it, Vance. Your father would be proud." She nodded, her eyes fixed on the retreating figures of Julian and Chloe, their empire reduced to ashes. The Vance ring gleamed on her finger, no longer a weight but a crown. She was no shadow, no ornament. She was Serafina Vance, and this stage was hers. The echo of Julian's desperate pleas still lingered in Serafina's mind as she sat in the sleek law office of Harper and Klein, the city's skyline a stark silhouette through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her long, straight hair fell over her shoulders, framing her poised figure in a tailored blazer. The red gown of the Gala replaced by a charcoal suit that spoke of power reclaimed. The Vance ring gleamed on her finger, a quiet anchor amidst the storm of papers and laptops spread across the mahogany table. Outside, the media frenzy churned. Headlines screamed of Julian Sterling's downfall, hashtags like "Shush Sterling Scandal" trending with venomous glee. Serafina's gaze was steady, her heart no longer swayed by the chaos she'd ignited. Her legal team, handpicked with Arthur Pendleton's guidance, moved with precision. "We've filed the suit," said Lena Harper, her lead attorney, sliding a dossier across the table. "Fraud, forgery, and misappropriation. The evidence is ironclad. Your signatures on those contracts don't match the originals." Lena's eyes, sharp as her pinstripe suit, met Serafina's. "Sterling's assets are frozen. He's done." Serafina nodded, her lips a tight line. "And the land?" she asked, her voice calm but edged with steel. "The coastal plot, her father's pride, was the heart of this fight." "Under review," Lena replied. "The courts are fast-tracking it, thanks to Pendleton's influence. We'll have it back in Vance's hands soon." She paused, a rare softness in her tone. "You've turned the tide, Serafina. The world's watching." The world indeed. Serafina's phone buzzed, a news alert flashing. Sterling faces criminal charges. She silenced it, her focus unwavering. The Gala's spotlight had faded, but the fire it kindled burned brighter. She wasn't just reclaiming land. She was dismantling a lie that had caged her for years. A softer buzz interrupted her thoughts. A text from Chloe. "I didn't know, Serafina. Julian said you approved everything. Please talk to me." The words were desperate, a plea wrapped in denial. Serafina's finger hovered over the screen, a flicker of old pain surfacing. Chloe's taunts at the Gala, her smug laughter, had cut deep. But revenge was a petty flame, and Serafina had no time for it. She deleted the message, an act, a quiet severing of the past. Chloe was Julian's pawn, not her enemy. "Ms. Vance," a junior attorney said, looking up from his laptop, "the DA's office just confirmed they're moving forward with a criminal investigation. Sterling's in custody." He hesitated, then added, "They want your statement." "Let them have it," Serafina said, her voice unwavering. "Every detail, every document. I want this airtight." Her eyes flicked to the window where the city sprawled below, a chessboard she now commanded. The thought of Julian, stripped of his arrogance, brought no joy, only resolve. Justice wasn't about gloating. It was about setting things right. Hours later, Serafina stood outside Sterling Development's headquarters, the glass tower gleaming coldly under the midday sun. Reporters swarmed, their cameras flashing like vultures circling a carcass. She adjusted her blazer, her hair catching the breeze as she watched security tape off the entrance. Inside, chaos reigned. Employees whispered, phones rang unanswered, and Julian's office stood empty, its door ajar. A memory flashed. Julian's smug grin as he'd handed her those routine papers, her trust a blindfold she'd worn too long. Now that trust was ashes. She stepped forward, ignoring the reporter's shouts. "Ms. Vance, any comment on Sterling's arrest?" And focused on the scene unfolding. Two officers emerged, Julian between them, his wrists cuffed, his tailored suit rumpled. His eyes, once so smug, were hollow, darting to her with a mix of fear and defiance. "Serafina," he called, his voice hoarse, "this isn't over." The officers tightened their grip, leading him to a waiting car. The crowd of onlookers, former employees, some with smirks, others with pity, watched in silence. Serafina met his gaze, her expression unreadable. This wasn't her victory lap. It was the end of his reign. One employee, a young woman who'd once flinched under Julian's temper, caught Serafina's eye. She gave a small nod, a gesture of quiet solidarity. Serafina returned it, a spark of connection in the chaos. This fight wasn't just for her. It was for everyone Julian had crushed. As the car pulled away, tires crunching on gravel, Serafina turned, her heels clicking against the pavement. The media's clamor faded behind her, but the weight of her next steps pressed forward. The land, the legacy, was within reach. But reclaiming it would take more than lawsuits. It would take the woman she was becoming, unyielding, unbroken, a true Vance. The sea breeze carried a sharp tang of salt as Serafina stood on the coastal plot, the heart of her family's legacy. Waves crashed against the cliffs below, their rhythm a steady pulse that matched her own. Her long, straight hair danced in the wind, framing her striking figure in a tailored navy vest, the fabric crisp against her ebony skin. The Vance ring gleamed on her finger, no longer a reminder of loss, but a beacon of triumph. Behind her, the skeletal frame of a new project loomed, but her focus was on the rusted sign at the site's entrance, Sterling Developments. It mocked her father's memory, a lie etched in steel. In her hand, a screwdriver glinted, its weight grounding her. No contractors, no assistants. She'd insisted on doing this herself. The act was personal, a ritual to bury the past. She stepped forward, her heels sinking slightly into the sandy earth, and began to work. The screws groaned, resisting, but she twisted with fierce determination, each turn a defiance of Julian's betrayal. The sign wobbled, then fell with a dull thud, dust rising like ashes of a fallen empire. Serafina's breath hitched as she knelt beside it, her fingers tracing the faded letters. Memories flooded back. Her father, Alistair, walking this land with her as a child, his voice warm with pride. "This is ours, Serafina," he'd said, pointing to the horizon. "Build something that lasts." She'd failed him once, signing away this legacy in blind trust. Never again. A soft crunch of footsteps broke her reverie. She stood, brushing dirt from her vest, and saw a worker approaching, carrying a polished wooden crate. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice respectful, "the new sign's ready." He opened the crate, revealing a sleek plaque. Vance Industries, the letters bold and unyielding, the hawk emblem etched beside them. Serafina's heart swelled, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. "Thank you, Tom," she said, her voice steady but warm. She took a cloth from her pocket and wiped the plaque, her movements deliberate, almost reverent. The worker stepped back, sensing the weight of the moment. As she lifted the sign, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow across the land. She secured it to the post, each screw a promise, to her father, to herself. When she stepped back, the plaque shone, a declaration that the Vance name was reborn. Later, in the small office once occupied by Julian, Serafina sifted through files, the air thick with the scent of old paper and fresh paint. The space was being transformed. Sterling's garish decor stripped away, replaced by clean lines and a single-frame photo on the desk. Her father smiling on this very land, his arm around a young Serafina. She touched the frame, whispering, "I did it, Dad." The words were soft, but they carried the weight of years redeemed. Her phone buzzed, a message from Lena Harper. Courts ruled in your favor. The land is officially yours. Serafina exhaled, a knot in her chest loosening. The legal battle, fueled by Pendleton's influence and her relentless evidence, had paid off. The coastal plot, along with other assets Julian had siphoned, was back in Vance's hands. But this office, this land, was more than property. It was her foundation, rebuilt from the ruins of betrayal. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Ms. Vance," a young assistant, Maya, peered in, holding a tablet. "The contractors need your approval on the initial designs for Vin Vance." Her eyes sparkled with admiration, a quiet echo of Serafina's determination years ago. "Bring them in," Serafina said, standing, her hair falling like a dark curtain as she moved to the window. Beyond the glass, the land stretched toward the sea, its potential limitless. She'd build something here. Not just towers or resorts, but a legacy that honored her father's vision. The contractors entered, their plans unfolding across the table. But Serafina's mind was already soaring, envisioning a future where her name stood tall. As they discussed timelines and blueprints, her gaze drifted to the photo of her father. She could almost hear his voice. Build something that lasts. She would. Not for Julian's investors or Chloe's taunts, but for the girl who'd walked this land with him, dreaming of greatness. The Vance ring caught the light, its hawk emblem a silent vow. This was her ground, her fight, her future. The project office buzzed with quiet intensity, blueprints and models of Vin Vance sprawling across a glass table. Serafina Vance stood at its center, her long, straight hair cascading over a cream blazer, her ebony skin glowing under the soft light of pendant lamps. The Vance ring glinted on her finger, a steady reminder of her reclaimed legacy. Across from her, Arthur Pendleton leaned over a topographic map, his silver hair catching the light as he traced the coastline with a weathered finger. Their voices clashed, not in anger, but in the fierce dance of minds unafraid to challenge. "You're pushing the residential zone too close to the cliffs," Serafina said, her tone sharp but measured, pointing to a cluster of proposed towers. "The erosion data doesn't support it. We need to shift them inland. Prioritize stability." Pendleton's eyes narrowed, a spark of respect beneath his gruff exterior. "Stability's key, but you're sacrificing views," he countered, tapping the map. "Buyers want that oceanfront allure. Move the commercial hub instead. It's less sensitive to setbacks." She crossed her arms, her hair shifting like a dark veil. "Views won't mean much if the cliffs crumble. My father built for permanence, not flash." Her voice carried an edge, the weight of Alistair's legacy lending it substance. Pendleton paused, then chuckled, a low rumble. "You're as stubborn as he was." He leaned back, studying her. "All right, Vance. Inland it is. But you owe me a better layout for the commercial zone." He slid the map toward her, a concession wrapped in challenge. Serafina's lips curved, a rare smile breaking through. "Deal," she said, sketching a quick adjustment with a pen. The room hummed with their synergy, a partnership forged not just on contracts but on mutual fire. Pendleton wasn't just an investor. He was a mirror to her resolve, a man who saw her not as Julian's shadow, but as Alistair's heir. Later, in a quiet restaurant tucked away from the city's clamor, they sat across a candlelit table, the air warm with the scent of rosemary and roasted lamb. The soft strum of a guitar drifted from a corner, a contrast to the office's intensity. Serafina sipped her wine, her posture relaxed but alert, her hair falling softly over one shoulder. Pendleton raised his glass, his eyes crinkling with warmth. "To Vin Vance," he toasted, his voice softer now. "And to you, Serafina. Alistair would have been proud, but I suspect he'd be a little intimidated too. You're a force." She laughed, a sound that felt foreign after months of strain. "He'd probably tell me to stop arguing with my investors," she said, her tone light but her eyes distant, tracing memories of her father. "He always said business was about trust, not just deals. I forgot that for too long." Pendleton leaned forward, his gaze steady. "You trusted the wrong man. That's not on you. It's on him. What you done since? That's the Vance I see." His words landed gently like the guitar's notes, stirring something in her chest. Not pity, but recognition. A bridge between their shared respect for her father's values. She set her glass down, her fingers brushing the Vance ring. "I'm not ready for more than this," she said, her voice firm but kind. "Not yet. Vin Vance is my focus, my legacy." She'd caught his earlier invitation, a subtle suggestion of a weekend retreat, and deflected it with clarity. Her heart, scarred by Julian, needed time to rebuild, not replace. Pendleton nodded, unfazed. "Fair enough," he said, a smile tugging at his lips. "But you're stuck with me as a partner, and maybe a friend, if you'll have me." His tone was genuine, stripped of pretense, and it warmed her more than the wine. "Friends," she agreed, her voice soft but sure. The candlelight flickered, casting shadows that danced across her face, a reflection of the woman she was becoming, strong, whole, no longer defined by betrayal. She thought of her father, his lessons of trust and permanence, and felt a quiet peace. Pendleton wasn't Julian, with his manipulative charm. He was an ally, a man who saw her fire and chose to stand beside it. As they left the restaurant, the night air cool against her skin, Serafina glanced at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Vin Vance was taking shape, a testament to her father, to her. Pendleton walked beside her, his presence steady, a silent promise of support. She wasn't alone anymore, and that realization felt like a new kind of freedom. The coastal wind whipped across the groundbreaking ceremony, carrying the scent of salt and promise. Serafina Vance stood at the podium, her long, straight hair flowing like a dark banner, her ebony skin radiant against a sleek emerald gown that shimmered with understated elegance. The Vance ring gleamed on her finger, a quiet testament to her journey. Behind her, the Vance Industries sign stood proud, its hawk emblem catching the midday sun. The crowd, investors, contractors, and community leaders, watched in rapt silence, a sea of faces lit with anticipation. A flag bearing the Vance crest fluttered above, its snap a heartbeat echoing her father's dream. Serafina gripped the podium, her voice steady and commanding. "Today we break ground on Vin Vance," she began, her words carrying over the cliffs. "This is more than a project. It's a legacy of permanence, built on integrity." The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers mingling with the crash of waves below. Among them, a young black woman, clutching a notebook, gazed up with wide, admiring eyes, her pen poised as if to capture every word. Arthur Pendleton stood to her left, his silver hair ruffling in the breeze, his nod a silent anchor. Their partnership, forged in fire and tempered by respect, had brought them here. Serafina's gaze swept the crowd, her heart swelling with a pride she hadn't felt since childhood walks with her father. Alistair's voice echoed in her mind. Build something that lasts. She was. A courier approached earlier that morning, delivering a letter from Julian, his handwriting jagged on prison stationery. "Serafina, let's talk. I can make this right." She'd held it over the shredder in her office, its blades humming like a judgment. Without reading further, she let it fall, the paper torn to ribbons in seconds. Julian's voice, his promises, his betrayal. They were dust now, unworthy of her time. She'd closed that chapter, her focus fixed on the future. Returning to the podium, Serafina raised her hand, silencing the crowd. "I stand here not just as the head of Vance Industries, but as my father's daughter," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "To honor his vision, I'm proud to announce the Vance Scholarship Fund, dedicated to young black women pursuing careers in real estate. This is our legacy, to lift others as we rise." The crowd roared, the young woman in the front row beaming, her notebook trembling in her hands. Serafina met her gaze, a silent promise passing between them. "You are seen." The ceremonial shovel gleamed as Serafina drove it into the earth, the crowd's cheers swelling like a tide. Pendleton joined her, their hands together on the handle, a symbol of their shared vision. The soil parted, rich and dark, the first step toward Vin Vance's towers. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment. But Serafina's eyes were on the horizon, where sea met sky in an endless promise. Later, she and Pendleton stood on the top floor of a nearby high-rise, the city sprawling below like a canvas of possibility. The Vance Industries sign glowed in the distance, kissed by the golden hues of a setting sun. Her gown caught the light, a quiet echo of the red dress that had once marked her defiance. Pendleton leaned against the railing, his voice warm. "You've built something extraordinary, Serafina. Not just a project, but a future." She smiled, her hair swaying in the evening breeze. "We built it," she corrected, her tone soft but firm. "And it's only the beginning." Her gaze lingered on the sign, its hawk emblem a mirror to the ring on her finger. She'd reclaimed her father's legacy, not just for herself, but for those who'd follow. The young woman with the notebook, the dreamers yet to come. Pendleton chuckled, raising a glass of sparkling water. "Two beginnings, then," he said, his eyes crinkling with admiration. She clinked her glass against his, the sound a quiet vow. The city pulsed below, alive with potential, and Serafina felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Julian's cage was gone, replaced by a horizon she'd shaped with her own hands. As the sun dipped below the sea, casting a crimson glow across the water, Serafina stood taller, her heart full. She was no longer the woman who'd stood invisible in a ballroom. She was Serafina Vance, architect of her destiny, a name that would echo far beyond the cliffs. Serafina's journey has burned bright, a testament to unbreakable will. Her story of defiance, justice, and legacy now rests with you. What moved you most? Her fiery stand against betrayal, or the horizon she carved for others? Share your thoughts below. Where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Your voice matters just as hers did.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.